Good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad that Cosmin and Qingyi invite me here to talk about the past 2 years, what I did a little project on Weiwei, which is more like Mark says that it's like a gossip, or in Taiwan, so many people says Weiwei like a virus, which very contagious, or with a very affection, which can affect you in everywhere, something like that. So Weiwei is a kind of a global or international phenomenon, but what I'm trying to present today is a kind of a local response, or kind of a perceptory history, a little history on Weiwei in Taiwan, because I think this phenomenon of Weiwei, which for sure everybody knows this phenomenon, but I think in Taiwan there has a kind of a geopolitics in between China and America, and so when we perceive Weiwei as a phenomenon, or his work, or his activism, we can make a different aspect to perceive this phenomenon. Actually, because I'm not a native speaker, so I will tell my story by the photos, and maybe there are some detail didn't clear. You can ask me later. Actually, Ai Weiwei's he got biggest solo exhibition in Asia, which he says is in Taiwan. It's not in mainland China or Hong Kong, but in Taiwan, Taipei Fine Art Museum. And this exhibition was held in 2011, and you know that in 2011 he was nominated as the first powerful artist figure in the world, something like that. But this show was curated before then, like 2 years, and but in the very year of that 2011, he was arrested in China, right? So like 3 months. And so he was not able to come. He can't come to Taiwan. So it's quite irony or humoristic, like humorous, that he named his show or his exhibition called Absence or Absent. And so I will start in this talk, which we call this kind of determinism, which protest artist or artivist, activist, become artivist, and it's quite controversial. But in a kind of determinism, he's not able to come because he will be arrested, something like that. And so, if the vocabulary or keywords is absent, what does it mean in the sphere of art and politics, or in the sphere of thinking about the exhibition? So that was a starting point that I was trying to say that in the Taiwan's context, it was not like something like that aggressive in something like German or in mainland China itself. It's more like a kind of a minimalism, or more like a self-distract from a certain field, or retreat, something like retreat. So I want to say that in Taiwan, this particular example, we can see this kind of political retreat in Taiwan's historical context. And then this is Taipei Fine Art Museum, which is the most important art museum in Taiwan. And so he got his solo exhibition there. And actually, my presentation will quite relevant to the Hong Kong, because in this exhibition, before that he was be arrested, and in Hong Kong there was a huge kind of strike, like on the street we protest something that to help Ai Weiwei to release him, something like that. In Hong Kong there was like 1,000 or 2,000 people on the street, and meanwhile in April 2011 in Taiwan there was a kind of a little forum, only like 50 people to gathering. So you can see this kind of different percept or on Ai Weiwei's phenomena, which he was being arrested. So I would say that why is Taiwan is so comfortable with himself itself, and do not to have the international information on this kind of human rights or something that artists doing. So I'm trying to make a little bit difference. So when I was doing my military service, I was trying to edit a book which called Who is Afraid of Ai Weiwei. So this is the actual theme in a show that I would say that what kind of stuff or what of work is put in the exhibition. This is Ai Weiwei's most phenomenal picture, which is like a Disney mouse or something like that. And then when I was gathering information about the Hong Kong street movement, they put his photos on their hands, something like that, and to try to say that we are Ai Weiwei, something like that. We are in Hong Kong, we are in Taiwan, we are facing the very same reality in East Asia, and so when I edited that book, we use a very traditional this kind of, I didn't how to say this in English, which is a kind of with a tag on the zombie, and the zombie will jump, and if you tag on his head, he will stop it. So this kind of tag, and this is called Who is Afraid of Ai Weiwei, and this tag was on his head. Why is that? Because it is a political situation that he's not allowing. He'll be arrested, and after August he was released, but his passport was taken in a local government in China. So who take this tag on his head? Who is afraid of Ai Weiwei? Something like that. And so I invite 20 art and cultural critiques on him with 21 essay on this book, and also 6 interview on Ai Weiwei to talk about his documentary. And so this book is authorized by his workshop fake studio. So there are so many pictures that was authorized. But I want to start my talk is that it's very funny that in this year, like in June, there was a Taipei Fine Museum's catalog of Ai Weiwei on his show. And please see here, catalog. Yeah, because he was very angry about the Taipei Fine Museum that they are not daring to invite him to come over. That actually in a global phenomenon that in German or in America, every gallery or museum was announcing that he was be arrested and he was not able to come German or America. And our government or Taipei Fine Museum, they say that he is not planning to go to Taiwan. Yeah, for the press, something like that. So even though they have no invitation for Ai, Or for I himself, he says that they didn't invite him very enthusiastically, something like that. So, but it's only a little fact. There are so many facts in this exhibition which make Ai Weiwei didn't want to put his work on his catalog. And with my essay and several art critics essay only in these books. So this book is not authorized in a sense, because one of the essay was not appreciated by Mr. Ai, which the essay called his work as a kind of a little bit fascist, aesthetic of fascism, like Susan Sontag talking about that, but in a very very diverse way. I think it's not a kind of a criticize, but kind of a political discussion on this kind of aesthetic. And so after all, I put on a subtitle like Ai Weiwei was being absent. Or absent, which was very positive, or you can voluntarily to be absent. But Ai Weiwei have been absent. And but the Ai Weiwei which quote like a method or like a thinking was not absent. Yeah, that was a kind of a subtitle of this book. And this is the very one this year regarding to Ai Weiwei. And so what I'm talking about is that in this exhibition, we may say that the very vocabulary or the keywords is absent. But for me, I think it's not, because I think the passive initiative, this term, will be a very vocabulary for art and the interaction of art and politics, especially in Taiwan or China's context. Because this being absent, or what in a kind of verb, which would be a passive way, like being commit suicide, which means in Hong Kong there's also a protest that a kind of human right fighter was being commit suicide in a jail. And so something like was more, the degree was more not as harsh as it is. It's like being traveled, because if you go to the police station or the local government and several police statement, or the local officer will take you to go far from the city, and you have been traveled. You have not traveled by yourself, you have been traveled. Something like that. So how can we think about this kind of passive situation in China or even in Taiwan, because he have been absent? So this kind of passive condition for artists or for thinkers, how can they doing their own initiative in this situation? So that's what I want to talk more about it. Has he been arrested or been absent, or what is his initiative during this kind of being absent? Actually, it himself like a virus, so he can vary himself or devenir himself, something like that, and to transform in a different aspect or different phenomena, something like that. So that's for instance, there will be kind of this the left down one. The tag was over tagged, and there was another mask. This mask maybe try to produce a different level of thinking about this absence. And actually, this kind of absence not only to the artist himself absence, because he is not about to come or he is not able to come. The question only concerned with the artist himself cannot come or not. But actually, in Taiwan's perception on this exhibition, they are also proclaiming that there are work of art are missing. What do you mean that the work of art is missing? Because in this exhibition, Weiwei only did one new piece, and for his kind of habit in different exhibition, he says that he will do like 6 or 8 new work for one new exhibition. But in this case, only one, and then later I will talk about that. And the other was all of his old work. But this old work in the Taipei Fine Museum, the biggest solo exhibition, there are more statue or different kind of furniture, something like that. And without several, which he as an activist, and to produce a new kind of way of thinking about art and a new work on this kind of political art. For example, for me, I think there are 2 or 3 artwork will be very exemplify this kind of interaction between art and politics. One is that you know that when 2008 the earthquake in Sichuan, then Weiwei take a group to investigate the list of the deaths, the children in Sichuan, because the local government didn't want to show the actual amount of the death. So he trying to make this kind of local or citizen movement to investigate. So investigate like in 2010, they investigate like 4,851 little child was dead in the earthquake. And then this only investigation, right? It's not art in a sense, because it's kind of social research or field study, something like that. But I already did a work on this. It's called 4,851 this work of art, which is a video work, was displaying the list of a name and murmuring in a kind of a mourning situation to depict this film. And this film is only with this kind of subtitle in the very back of a movie. But there is no movie. It's only the subtitle. Yeah, and this goes for like 80 minutes. Every names. So I think it's very strong. And I think it's video art. And within a kind of political investigation or social engagement, and to present this kind of artwork. This is only the first example. And the second one is this one. Just when he investigated in Sichuan, it sees so many this backpack and around the ground, and he was because in Sichuan there are so many buildings was still there, but so many buildings were in school was collapsed. So it was very obvious that there might be corruptions in the public architecture. So he's trying to investigate on this kind of 豆腐渣工程, means very low budget construction. And then when he get on site, he saw so many backpacks and no children. Children was all gone or beneath the ground. So he trying to use the new pack on German, the fascist, the former fascist museum. And then he used this kind of also quote fascist aesthetic way to use like a North Korean, right? When you get in a stadium, and so many people use the carts, something like that. And he also used a backpack to quote a little mother says that her daughter was happily living in the world for 7 years. The mother wants the world to remember that. So this work is called remembering. So either this work or the another one was not able to join in Taipei. I think it was quite tragedy in a sense, because I was an activist, but in the show we didn't see his this kind of investigate art. And then only one piece was more relevant to his actual condition, is that his house was surrounded by the surveillance camera, and he just put a camera in stone lines, like a petronal lines, like you make something soft and become stone, something like that. You let the camera patronize, and then. So I think it's only one which is relevant to his actual condition. The rest of the work was more say like a political pop or something like Andy Warhol or Duchamp, something like that. And then so actually some critics say that this helmet is also about his actual situation, because he has been hit by the police by the police in Sichuan, and make his head bleed and almost dead. So what I'm talking about is that in this exhibition there are no this kind of controversial work in this exhibition. Only with a new work, this is Bicycle Forever, which is 1,200 bicycles and to get together and without seat, without the seat you can ride. And also this absent, which in Chinese 缺席 means 就是no seat. You have no seat. It is also relevant to the Liu Xiaopo's Nobel Prize about Peace Prize. No seat. But this is only one. And what has been missing? Already also, some critics says that his documentary also did not join in a museum. But as we know, so many movie or documentary can be shown in like MoMA or Guggenheim, something like that. So his documentary also not able to present in the exhibition. So this absence will be more we can detailize that the art not only the artist absent, but also the work of art was absent, but Taiwan was there. Taiwan was there just nearby mainland China. So many Taiwanese people trying to get the Taiwan part, the Taiwan part to take out of the statue, because something like that, independent or dependent. And actually, the museum officer says that they have a little snail just underneath the Taiwan, so you cannot put something like that. So it's very interesting. So what I'm talking about is this Ai Weiwei used this kind of passive initiative in a way that he trying to retreat or subtract from this exhibition. So it's kind of empty-mize this exhibition, and within a certain kind of political space, and to invite different people like me to join to add the kind of significances to this exhibition. So it's kind of a participatory practice in a sense. But Ai Weiwei was so clever that even though he's not able to stay in Taiwan, he was also be interviewed by our local radio station. He says that we are inviting you to come here to Taiwan to erase the absent, these words, to erase, and you are coming. You can freely to come Taiwan, something like that. And I was so maybe I can come, but the absent situation of Taiwan was not that easy to erase in the international society. So wow, it's a kind of artist hermeneutics or interpretation on Taiwan, and Taiwan was the real thing which was absent is Taiwan. It's not himself or the work himself. So it's quite political, right? So we can see that in this case, we can see that in a contemporary art situation, this exhibition itself might not be the problem of which artist was come or not, or which work was included or not. The main issue or the fundamental issue of the exhibition itself will be about to relate the crowd and to relate the local historical context with a political interest, something like that, or disinterest. So in this sense, I think this exhibition was very worthy to say, especially in Taiwan's context and relevant to Hong Kong or mainland China. And then, actually, the book has a double side, and another one is so many Ai Weiwei, so many virus become Ai Weiwei, which means actually in Hong Kong they use this mask, and actually in Hong Kong they have a previous forum on Ai Weiwei, which called Ai Weiwei as a method. Which means Ai Weiwei is not only an icon or international phenomena, but we think it's a kind of a method which we can appropriate or to take this method to against different institute or government. So Ai Weiwei as a method itself means that we can think this art as a kind of a political strategy or tactic or strategy to against a certain issue. And then, so we are trying to see that in Taiwan's context, actually there are different artists or designers try to worship this Ai Weiwei phenomena, something like that. And I also collaborate with these artists and to make a documentary show. And the documentary show that 7 piece of his documentary, and I also invite over the Taiwan and Hong Kong and the mainland China the dissident kind of a critical thinker to talk on his documentary. And this show was curated just in Taipei City, and to make a different kind of comparison to the Taipei Fine Arts exhibition. So we also held so many forums in Taiwan. So that would be a case that actually, if we say that the interaction between art and politics, we must think that this artivist is not only a kind of star or international phenomenon, but also we can see what have it been in a different local context, and what did he did in a new perspective to show himself in an absent way, something like that. So I think Ai Weiwei, this case in Taiwan was a kind of a double bind, which if you do not participate with this exhibition, that will be his assertion that Taiwan was a comfortable country or not nation, a country or something, and they are not willing to understand the international affair, something like that. So this show was so cold, and so cold down in a very serious degree. That would be his profit, right? And but in a country, if we join to participate, this kind of work, like me, I curate a documentary festival, and then his show will be more controversial in a sense, which is growing the local response, and to make a more controversial or complex. So actually, this photo is quite treacherous because in the Taipei Fine Museum, they are not allowing any kind of poster from outside in the very gallery of their rooms. But this one just just nearby the work. So it's quite bizarre. I don't know who take the poster beneath this work. But I think there was a kind of an interaction or participatory arts or curate to have a different meaning in this kind of Ai Weiwei phenomena. So I already said that it's a kind of double bind, which is very ambiguous, that either we participate or not, this show will still go on in a very way which Ai Weiwei predict in a sense. And but maybe you could say that he's not able to come, and he was not planning this whole series. Is that art critic like me was more suspicious on him. But actually, in the Taipei Fine Museum, the curator, which called himself not a curator but an assistant, because all the name or the work which have been chosen, and the documentary was not able to show, all decided by Mr. Ai. So I think my suspicion or something like that was more justified in this long run. So I'm today trying to present the whole process in Taiwan as a local historical context to perceive Ai Weiwei, and to see this kind of passive initiative can do a lot more in a very like a humorous way, because we know humor means that you gain a kind of authorities logic, and to take this logic on yourself, but in a very harsh way that you may create a more obtuse meaning to the whole situation. That was my presentation. Thank you.
I have I guess a kind of comment. That whole concept of the antagonistic absence, I think with Ai Weiwei, he's such a rock star, right? And the international community knows him so well. But someone said in the panel yesterday afternoon about questioning the importance of the biennials. And I think the biennial is exactly what the dissident community, the dissident art community in China needs. Because if other dissident artists who aren't as well known as Ai Weiwei can receive platforms from the outside world, it gives them legitimacy and it gives them voice, which they otherwise will never have. So I think, I just would encourage those in this room to consider the Chinese, that community, when evaluating the work.
Actually, there are critics on this kind of phenomena that Mr. Ai maybe reproduce the logic of post-Cold War logic, which is a kind of a dichotomy, and then to dismiss or to ignore the globalization phenomena, which was already the barrier was being destroyed, and we have see more issues on laboring or something like that. So the way of I did in this kind of a dichotomy, which is kind of old-fashioned in a sense, and when in mainland China, there are artists saying that he was trying to make this kind of aggressive attitude, but within a kind of a binary presupposition, something like that. But I think in a sense that if we reconsider that, if we consider Taiwan in this case, that was not in this kind of dichotomy, because it itself have centered on America and China, right? So what does that mean to have this kind of false part in the distribution? And that was what I want to describe more about it. Yeah.
Thanks for a really engaging presentation. I guess I want to round back on this question of the active and the passive. But the first thing that it occurred to me to comment upon is that the geography on which you have focused in your presentation, in a sense, the issues you raise actually belong, I think, to a much bigger geography. It would be, the speaker's prerogative to define that. But I guess I should express something of a solidarity from the position of Singapore, interestingly. I was told to send everybody regards from Lee Weng Choi, who is a frequent contributor to this community, who was also, as artistic co-director of the Substation, a not-for-profit art centre in Singapore, got into quite a lot of trouble for mounting a project through the Substation involving an Australian artist by the name of Deborah Kelly, which was a comment very directly upon the Tiananmen massacre and the anniversary thereof. Now, that was a performative project. It was internet. It was a big community project, worldwide, participatory video thing. And of course, that got Weng Choi into a lot of trouble in Singapore. But the reason that it gets him into a lot of trouble, I think, leads us towards this slightly bigger geography, and particularly to the question of media. In that case, what happens is that the quid pro quo between Singapore and mainland China, Singapore and Beijing, turns on the question of what will and won't be covered in official or officially controlled press channels. And so in that case, there is a sort of tacit or explicit deal, who knows, which means that Singapore has to police Chinese issues in its own public space, such as it is in Singapore, and that, in return, certain favours will be granted. For example, when something horrible happens in China, BBC or CNN might not be allowed in, but the Singapore network will get content and syndicated everywhere. So I don't know exactly what the question is, but I think we should think about the question of activity and passivity, perhaps, against a background of this kind of, if you like, even media warfare. I think it's and in that economy of the dissemination of the political, I think, I don't know Weiwei's practiced that intimately, but I mean, I think you would have to say he's been very active in engaging with changes in media form and structure. So I just wanted to sort of bring that to a slightly bigger field.
Let me add a little bit that actually I have read also Deleuze that in the humor he talk about the humor itself also have a kind of passivity, which is within a kind of a activist, which is this kind of passivity was not the whole logic will dominate him throughout in the whole process, but within a certain degree that he can respond, and to trying to make a different I don't know how to say different directions in a very lower ground. So I think this kind of passivity was very interesting. But in a normal saying that passivity was only passive, right? So my presentation here was a passive initiative, which means in a passive condition, what can we be initiate?
I would maybe like to pick up on what David was saying and extend it in a certain way to Germany, which in its very stupid, simple way of looking at human rights, the media in Germany was itself functionalizing this whole issue. So that the whole fear of China's economic power and superpower was somehow devolved into this issue. And it was almost impossible to protest against what was happening to Ai Weiwei because it was always framed in this form. So that we actually decided the only activism or only political position we would have is, instead of demanding what everyone was doing, for the Chinese government to release Ai Weiwei and make him visible again and so on, to demand of our government to do that. Because that government is, of course, implicated, but it wasn't. But the media wasn't implicating it at all.
Yeah, I just want to say that, unfortunately, in a sense, it seems to me that Ai Weiwei has played into the hands of the government strategy, which is to isolate him as an individual. And to actually remove him from the groups in which he was involved in terms of coordination, in terms of what was happening socially within China. And Sichuan, as you pointed out, was one of those. The man who was hung because of stealing a bicycle is another. The whole series of actions in which he was involved. And media had played into this, but unfortunately, I mean, I think that also the government strategy very much to isolate an individual and remove them, in fact, in terms of Weiwei, in terms of issues having to do with income declaration, etc., and isolate him as being somehow a rogue citizen of China, rather than focus on, in fact, the issues at hand, as he's addressed in the past few years.
Charles, I think you're right, but it goes even further because the art world is doing the same. Because who's making themselves knowledgeable about other dissidents? Or Potosi exhibition had this Chinese migrant workers museum there. But it wasn't, and it was in the middle of Germany, in Berlin, in the Haus der Kultur in der Welt. But people didn't look at this work or look at this activism and connect it in any form. So it's isolated as well. We're just protesting about Weiwei.
About this kind of isolation, I would totally agree with you that actually after post-Cold War, in the globalization field, everybody was in a liberalism, which that everybody was a kind of individual or isolated, and then but in this sense, so even though we got a movement, but in this isolated logic, we create heroes, right? So this kind of iconic or heroic formulation, which was quite, we have to criticize it. And but in a sense that as for the media concerned, I think this kind of a figure which may have its own media attribute. So this attribute of media, which means he can pass on different information, which means actually there are 6 or 8 documentary which produced by Ai Weiwei Studio, but actually he didn't direct it. Actually, it's so many filmmakers, but actually it also doing about is about an issue that this kind of a community or a warehouse or workshop, different workers, where are they? So where are these? Which kind of a relation is using appropriate by each other? Actually, I know so many documentary was leave the studio or something like that. So I think it would kind of a mutual appropriate in a sense, yeah.